Good morning. I'm Vimala, and today is December 23rd. Cold, but dry here today, so no snow. I don't know if we'll have snow for Christmas. So, I want to go back to Wisdom is Bliss, the book I've been reading from by Robert Thurman, the 4 friendly fun facts that can change your life. And it's really it's a book on the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And I love his take on it. I love his way of looking at the Eightfold Path. And he's bringing out some beautiful concepts that I think are just maybe a little bit different from what we hear in our Theravadan tradition, and he's in a Tibetan tradition, but it's just, we're talking about the same things, but sometimes from a different angle, and it's very good. It's very beautiful. His writing is beautiful, and he's really speaking from a clear place. So last night in a class, a meditation class I was leading, a question came up afterwards from someone about right speech and having trouble with it at work. And I've read some from Robert Thurman's book, and he's, instead of using the term right, he uses realistic. Bhante G uses harmonious, Bhante Gunaratana, which I think is beautiful because all of the steps on the path are the steps that help us have a harmonious life, and that's being connected with others and also being harmonious with ourselves. And so Robert Thurman used the term realistic, which I think I really like it because the Buddha talks about, we're trying to see things clearly, see things as they really are. So I'm going to read, her question was about speech in the workplace, and I'm going to have to, let me just. Excuse me, I have a runny nose this morning. I've read some from the chapter on realistic speech, but I'd like to read the first few pages because I think I had skipped into a different part that was of interest to me. But this at the beginning is just as beautiful, and it's really important with speech. This is chapter 4 in his book. The first 2 branches of the Eightfold Path, realistic worldview, which is what we call usually, it's often right understanding, and realistic motivation, or we call right intention, the first 2 constitute the higher education in wisdom. This is the scientific exploration of reality as we experience it, and we transform our experience by understanding it. To activate the 3rd branch of the path, we move from the super education in wisdom to the super education in ethics, which requires us to learn more about how ethics connects to evolution. First of all, we have to acknowledge the evolutionary power of speech, words, and language in order to use them to reshape our lives along with others. The 3 path branches constituting the super education in ethics are realistic speech, realistic evolutionary action, and realistic livelihood. Why begin with realistic speech? Because good evolutionary actions begin with learning. The realization that actions are evolutionary in their causal impact on oneself and others mandates one choice of livelihood. Ultimately, all 8 branches of the path must function simultaneously. Their order of presentation emphasizes a best sequence of approach, but they are not rungs on a ladder where you step off one to get on to another. They are rather like a symphony. You add one instrument at a time until all are playing harmoniously together, and each one comes into its fullest power only combined with all the others. Isn't that a beautiful way? That's like Bhante Ji talking about harmoniously. But I love this. You add one instrument at a time until all are playing harmoniously together. And that's how we work with the Eightfold Path. It's beautiful. So speech is so important, not only because of our connection with others, and we'll be reading about that, but learning is such an important part of that, the evolution of the mind. So there are two more short sections I'd like to read about speech. The next section is scientists, politicians, artists, and educators. In many of his suttas, the Buddha describes realistic speech as speaking the truth and avoiding falsehoods, speaking diplomatically, reconciling others' disagreements, and refraining from divisive speech, slander, and backbiting, speaking sweetly and pleasingly, avoiding abusive speech, and speaking meaningfully, avoiding senseless chatter. None of these four types of realistic speech is fanatical, since one should not use truth to cause harm in certain situations, should not be diplomatic unless it will help the others involved, should not flatter people who are in error or misbehaving just to please them, and should at least withhold meaningful speech in a situation where you know someone will misunderstand. As in all things, pragmatism is essential. And I think that's a wonderful distinction he makes. Let me read this paragraph again because I think it's really important. Because this is talking about sometimes the boundaries that we question about speech. In many of his discourses, the Buddha describes realistic speech as speaking the truth and avoiding falsehoods, speaking diplomatically, reconciling others' disagreements and refraining from divisive speech, slander, and backbiting, speaking sweetly and pleasingly, avoiding abusive speech, and speaking meaningfully, avoiding senseless chatter. None of these four types of realistic speech is fanatical, since one should not use truth to cause harm in certain situations, should not be diplomatic unless it will help the others involved, should not flatter people who are in error or misbehaving just to please them, and should at least withhold meaningful speech in a situation where you know someone will misunderstand. As in all things, pragmatism is essential. So he's reminding us this is not a fanatical way of looking at speech, but it's pragmatic. It makes sense. It fits the situation. So we wouldn't say something to someone who doesn't have the understanding. We wouldn't get all intellectual and speak above them just to confuse them, or something that they're not ready for yet, that they don't have the background for something. It's the reason we go through grades in school. We just don't dump all the information on someone, say the first time they're able to read something. You know, we have grades to help us develop. We develop our language, and as we develop our intellect and our understanding from experience. So it isn't fanatical. As in all things the Buddha taught, pragmatism is essential. Speaking truth is what scientists are dedicated to doing. They investigate reality and must try to report on what they find, or at least what they consider the truth. Speaking diplomatically is the focus of peacemakers, those who seek to help others improve their relationships with each other, serving humanity in that way. Speaking pleasingly is generally good for one's own relations with others, and the sweetest speeches are the creations of artists, poets, playwrights, novelists, musicians, bards, and singers. Speaking meaningfully is best for everyone to do, and especially the responsibility of educators, those who help others become more realistic by sharing reality. And that's dharma. The dharma, it's reality, the way things really are. It's the truth. Those who help others become more realistic by sharing reality or dharma with them insofar as they have some deeper experience and knowledge of it to share. So we don't try to share beyond our own level of knowledge or experience. So these are all things that, depending on how your livelihoods, if you're an educator, say someone who's working with teams of people or groups of people, supervising people, managing people, educating people. Speaking diplomatically, I'm reading this again, is the focus of peacemakers, those who seek to help others improve their relationships with each other, serving humanity in that way. And the pleasing speech generally is good for one's own relations with others. So, with our own personal speech. So, a lot of us in our jobs always fall into that category of being a peacemaker. Whether you're a teacher or a manager, or you have to work with a group of people, being a peacemaker, being diplomatic is very important. So here's the last section I'll read. Speech creating connection. Speech is a particularly human, deep way of interconnecting with the mind of others. When you talk and I listen, I open my mind to yours, letting your thoughts direct my attention. When I talk and you listen, you do the same for me. When we read the recorded speech of people from the past, we share their minds, and when future generations read our thoughts, we share with them. Thus, each of us has the responsibility to be wakeful of what effects we are producing in others' minds when we speak and when we listen. We also have the opportunity to enter into others' experiences of things we cannot experience ourselves. Isn't that beautiful? I think I've read that paragraph before, but speech should be only truthful. It should be only peacemaking. It should be only gentle, and it should be only meaningful. Babbling meaninglessly or harshly or untruthfully, or to make people enemies with each other, those kinds of speech are really negative actions. When you listen to someone, they have the privilege of being in your mind temporarily, and they should not abuse that privilege by talking rot. They should try to help your mind. When you speak, you shouldn't invade other people's minds and speak a bunch of nonsense and rot and lies to them and distress them even more than they've already been distressed. Speech enables us to learn and thereby to evolve, to grow into wiser, more experienced, more realistic, more capable, and happier beings. Learning new things may even be the essential purpose of all living beings, essential to the quest for true happiness in any one life and along the range of limitless ongoing lives. Human beings, angels, titans, and gods are distinguished by speech. We humans live and evolve in speech, not only physically and mentally, in body and mind, but spiritually and ethically. Speech has a central role in shaping reality, body being shaped by mind and mind by speech. Through speech, we individual humans can expand our self-identifications to become communal beings without necessarily losing a sense of individual responsibility. As a great Tsongkhapa said in his enlightenment poem, The Short Essence of Good Eloquence, and we have read this before, of all the Buddha's many deeds, their deeds of speech are the supreme. For this very reason, the wise applaud the Buddhas for their speech. So I think that's the best section to focus on in terms of using speech in our relationships with others, and even in our work, being peacemakers rather than troublemakers. And it's not by telling people untruths. It's by being careful the way we speak. And are we speaking with kindness or harshness? And different situations require different kinds of speech. So speaking diplomatically is the focus of peacemakers, those who seek to help others improve their relationships with each other, serving humanity in that way. Speaking meaningfully is best for everyone to do, and especially the role of educators, because they're sharing the truth with others. So I think those are always good to remember. And moving through the holidays, we may have more interaction with others, or maybe making phone calls, checking in with people. Hopefully not mixing too much but being careful if we are. We certainly have a lot of the COVID variant going around, I know here. So that's a good thing to remember, not just at work, but at work I think it's really good to think of being a peacemaker in almost every job, dealing with coworkers, dealing with maybe customers, dealing with students, dealing with patients, clients. We can be a peacemaker rather than someone creating divisiveness. So think about that. So this is such a beautiful book. I want to read from a little bit more from Right Effort, because that was such a beautiful section too. But I wanted to do a little bit more reading on speech today, because that question came up for me. So we don't have much time, but we certainly have time to meditate and get started on. If you want to sit longer, maybe this can help you be the start. But remember, when we are learning to meditate or working on building up that meditation, our practice, our training, muscles, we do as much as we can do, and we don't beat on ourselves if we're not doing something that we've set as a goal. You may not be able, have the time, or right now have the stamina almost to sit for an hour in the morning and an hour at night. But what you can do is, when you have 5 minutes to sit and just be with your breath, you can do that. Or when you feel some unpleasant emotions, maybe irritation at another person, or you feel some sadness, maybe sometimes there's holiday sadness, right? We think about past holidays and maybe people who aren't with us now, who were in the past. So if you feel sadness arising, or melancholy, or anger, or fear, if you can stop and take 5 minutes and sit, or go out and take a walk and practice walking meditation, and just let your mind begin to clear, and that emotion can rise, and you can look at it without being overwhelmed by it, and you can practice with it. See it arise, try not to add anything to it, just be aware of it. It may be something very familiar, but instead of chasing it around or pushing it away, you can take a walk. You can sit for a few minutes and just let it rise and be aware of it, recognize it, and then if we don't feed it with more, if we don't build a fire under it, we can watch it fade away. So sitting and just taking that time to allow some of those things to rise and pass away, those are very important ways to practice meditation. And they might be in 5-minute spaces, or 10-minute spaces, or just go outside and walk. Walk a little, walk a lot, and keep your mind free of just chatter. And try to work. That's a wonderful way to work with what is arising within. So why don't we start, and then I will have to leave in about 5 to 10 minutes, but you can keep going. So just let your body be breathing for you, and be aware of the body breathing for you. If you're sitting, I always like to remember to roll my shoulders back, just to open up the chest, so my lungs, so just even a simple breath, I'm aware of more oxygen coming in for my lungs. Be aware of the body breathing. We can feel our breath in our belly. It's good to feel it there, and not just at the very top of our chest. We can feel our breath just around our nostrils. This is more subtle. But we just feel a little of the movement. Breathing out, the air that we breathe out is warmer. And as we breathe in, it might be cooler. But we feel that sensation of the movement, maybe a little tickling. Remember that when we talk about speech, it's very important to try to reduce the idle chatter, just the chattering that we need to do. Sometimes we think we need to do it socially, interacting. But that chatter is going on in our heads as well. So we can think about reducing the chatter in our brains. Just be in the present moment. Stay in the present moment by feeling the body. And letting the mind be a part of the body, not wandering around, not chattering, babbling or chattering away, but just let it drop down into the body. Feel your connection with nature, with the earth. Let that connection remind us of our connection to all living things. And let that help us be present in this moment, not in the past, not in the future. Just stay with the breath. So my time is up with you. Keep sitting if you can. And try to do everything today, everything we do, that we say, looking especially at speech today and all of our thoughts. May they be beautiful and beneficial to us, but may they also be of benefit to all other beings as we feel our connections to all living beings. Thank you. I'll be with you again tomorrow.